The distant howl of a lone wolf pierced the Montana twilight as Olivia Everett collapsed to her knees in the freshly turned soil of the cemetery, her trembling hands clutching at emptiness where her family should have been. The sickness had taken them all: her husband of 2 years, her infant son, and her elderly father, leaving her alone with nothing but a small homestead and a future as barren as the winter plains. Idaho Blackburn watched from a respectful distance, his weathered Stetson held against his chest. He hadn't planned on attending a stranger's funeral when he rode into Whispering Creek, but something about the young widow's solitary figure against the vast landscape had drawn him to dismount and bear witness. At 28, he'd seen enough death to last several lifetimes, but the raw grief etched across her face struck him like a physical blow. The year was 1875, and the Montana Territory was unforgiving to those who faced it alone, especially a woman. Idaho had been drifting since the end of the war, taking work where he could find it, moving on when the ghosts caught up to him. But as the last of the mourners departed and the woman remained, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, he found himself unable to mount his horse and ride away. "Madam," he said softly, approaching with the caution one might use with a spooked mare, "night's coming. You shouldn't be out here alone." Olivia didn't look up. "I've nowhere else to be," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying, "and no one waiting if I were." Idaho knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm sorry for your loss." She finally turned toward him, her face tear-streaked and pale in the fading light. "3 graves in 1 week," she said, gesturing to the fresh mounds of earth. "My whole world buried beneath the dirt." Her arms wrapped around herself, empty and seeking comfort where there was none. Idaho recognized the gesture. He'd done the same after Antietam, after finding his brother's body among the fallen. "I know it doesn't seem possible now," he said, "but the pain doesn't stay this sharp forever." "What would you know of it?" she snapped, then immediately looked ashamed. "I'm sorry, that was unkind. No need for apologies. We're all entitled to our grief." Idaho stood and offered his hand. "But the living need shelter and food. Your home is 2 miles east." Olivia stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment before accepting it. As she rose, a fresh wave of tears overtook her. "I can't bear to return to an empty house." Idaho hesitated, then spoke words that would change both their lives forever. "Those arms may be empty now," he said gently, "but if you'll allow it, I'll help fill them with hope again. At least let me see you safely home." The sun had nearly disappeared by the time they reached Olivia's homestead, a modest cabin with a small barn and corral. Idaho helped her dismount, then tended to his horse and the mare she'd ridden. "You have livestock?" he asked, noting the empty corral. "A milk cow and 2 chickens," she replied distantly. "In the barn. I haven't tended to them today." "I'll see to them," Idaho offered. "You should rest." Olivia nodded mechanically and moved toward the cabin. Idaho watched her go, noticing how she paused at the threshold, gathering courage before pushing open the door. In the barn, he found the animals neglected but not in dire condition. He milked the cow, collected 2 eggs, and made sure all had fresh water and feed. By the time he returned to the cabin, darkness had fallen completely. He knocked gently before entering. Olivia sat at a simple wooden table, staring at nothing, a cold cup of coffee before her. "The animals are tended," he reported, setting the milk and eggs on the table. "You should eat something." "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're a stranger." Idaho removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair in need of a trim. "My ma raised me to believe we're put on this earth to help each other through the hard times." He paused. "And I've seen that look before in my own reflection." "What was her name?" Olivia asked, showing the first spark of interest in something beyond her grief. "Whose name?" "The woman you lost." I recognized that look too. Idaho's blue eyes clouded briefly. "Elizabeth, my wife. Yellow fever took her 3 years ago in Texas. I'm sorry." Olivia's hand reached out automatically, then withdrew, "as am I for your losses." Idaho moved to the stove. "Now, I'm going to make you something to eat, and then I'll be on my way." "Where will you go?" "I've been heading to Bozeman. Heard they need hands for spring cattle drive preparations." Olivia watched him move about her kitchen with quiet efficiency. He was tall and lean, with a scar running along his left forearm. His movements spoke of a man accustomed to taking care of himself. "I can pay you," she said suddenly. Idaho paused in cracking an egg. "For what, madam?" "To stay, just for a few days." Her cheeks flushed. "The planting needs to be done, and there are repairs. I can't manage alone right now." "I'm not looking for charity work," he said gently. "It's not charity. It's honest pay for honest work." Her voice grew stronger. "My husband left some money, not much, but enough." Idaho considered her offer. The woman clearly needed help, and he had no pressing engagements. 3 days, he finally agreed. "Then we'll reassess." Relief washed over Olivia's face. "Thank you, mister," she paused. "I don't even know your name." "Idaho Blackburn," he replied, returning to his cooking. "And your Mrs.?" "Everett, Olivia Everett." She took a deep breath. "Though I suppose I'm just Olivia now." Idaho set a plate of scrambled eggs before her. "Eat, Mrs. Everett. Tomorrow comes early on a farm." He slept in the barn that night, respecting propriety despite the wilderness surrounding them. Civilization might be scarce in the Montana Territory, but reputation was still a woman's most valuable possession. Idaho knew that whatever help he provided couldn't come at the cost of her standing in the community. Morning arrived with a pale, watery sun and the promise of spring warmth. Idaho rose before dawn, tended the animals, and was splitting firewood when Olivia emerged from the cabin. She wore a simple dark dress, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun, but her eyes seemed clearer than the day before. "You're already working," she observed, wrapping a shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Daylight's precious," he replied, swinging the axe in a practiced arc. "I've made a list of what needs immediate attention. The roof has some weak spots and your north fence is down in places." Olivia nodded. "My husband, James, was planning repairs before." She swallowed hard. "Before the fever." Idaho set the axe down. "I'm sorry to ask, but how long has it been?" 2 weeks since James passed. 4 days since I buried my father and baby Thomas." Her voice hitched on her son's name. "The doctor said it was influenza, but it took them so quickly." "And you were spared?" "Yes." Bitterness edged her voice. "I was spared to cry into empty arms each night." Idaho stepped closer, his expression earnest. "Mrs. Everett, survival isn't something to feel guilty about. It's a responsibility." She looked up at him, searching his face. "Is that what you told yourself, after your wife?" "Every day," he admitted, "and some days I even believe it." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You're an honest man, Mr. Blackburn." "Idaho, please, and I try to be." The 3 days Idaho had promised stretched into a week, then 2. Spring planting couldn't wait, regardless of grief, and Olivia proved to be a determined if silent partner in the work. They established a rhythm, Idaho handling the heavier labor while Olivia tended the kitchen garden and animals. They spoke little during the days, but evenings brought conversation over simple meals. "You have a way with horses," Olivia remarked one evening, watching Idaho through the window as he gentled a half-wild mare he'd found wandering near the property. "Were you a horse trainer before?" "Among other things," he replied later as they ate. "Cavalry during the war, ranch hand, scout for a wagon train. I've done whatever kept me fed and moving. Always moving, she observed. Never staying. Idaho studied her across the table. In the 2 weeks since the funeral, color had returned to her cheeks, and she'd begun taking more interest in her appearance. Tonight, she'd loosened her hair slightly from its severe style. Staying means building something, he said finally. And building means having something to lose. Like I did, she whispered. Yes. He met her gaze directly, which makes me wonder where your courage comes from, Mrs. Everett. Olivia, she corrected softly, and it's not courage, it's simply that I have no choice. We always have choices. Idaho pushed his plate away. You could sell this place, move to town, find work as a seamstress or teacher, and abandon everything James and I built. She shook her head. This land is all I have left of him of them. I may fail, but I won't surrender without trying. Idaho smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. Then, I reckon you're the bravest person I've met in a long while. Spring blossomed fully across the Montana landscape, bringing wildflowers and longer days. Idaho repaired the cabin roof, rebuilt fences, and helped Olivia plant wheat and corn. The routine gave her structure, a reason to rise each morning beyond grief. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the field, Olivia found herself studying Idaho's profile. He'd removed his hat to wipe sweat from his brow, and the sun highlighted streaks of gold in his hair. You never speak of your life before Elizabeth, she said impulsively. Were there children? Pain flickered across his features. No, we'd hoped, but it wasn't to be. He replaced his hat. Perhaps that was a blessing, considering. I'm not sure, Olivia said thoughtfully. Having Thomas, even for those 6 months, I wouldn't trade it despite the pain of losing him. Idaho nodded. Your husband was a fortunate man. We were happy, she acknowledged. It wasn't a grand passion like in novels, but we had affection, respect, and shared dreams. She looked across the fields. James was kind and steady. He deserved better than a frontier grave at 30. And what do you deserve, Olivia? Idaho asked quietly. The question caught her off guard. I don't know anymore. That evening, as Olivia prepared supper, a wagon approached the homestead. She peered through the window to see Reverend Mills and his wife arriving. Hastily wiping her hands, she stepped outside to greet them. Reverend Mrs. Mills, she called. This is unexpected. The minister's wife, a plump woman with perpetually concerned eyes, glanced toward the barn where Idaho was visible. We've come to check on your welfare, dear. There's been talk in town. Olivia's spine stiffened. Talk? Reverend Mills cleared his throat uncomfortably. About your arrangement with Mr. Blackburn. A young widow living alone with a strange man. Mr. Blackburn is my hired hand, Olivia interrupted, her voice cool. He sleeps in the barn and has been nothing but respectful. Nevertheless, Mrs. Mills interjected, appearances matter. Perhaps you should consider moving to town where we can keep a proper eye on you. Idaho approached, wiping his hands on a rag. Afternoon, Reverend, Madam. The minister nodded stiffly. Mr. Blackburn, I understand you've been assisting Mrs. Everett. Yes, sir. The spring planting doesn't wait for grief. Admirable, but surely you understand that a young woman's reputation is delicate. Idaho's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. I do indeed, which is why I've kept my distance and behaved with absolute propriety. Even so, Mrs. Mills sniffed. People will talk. Let them, Olivia said suddenly. This is my home, my land. I need help to keep it, and Mr. Blackburn has provided that help honorably. The Reverend sighed. We're only concerned for your welfare, Olivia. Then help me find a girl to stay as companion, she suggested. But I won't abandon my home. After further discussion and thinly veiled warnings, the Mills departed with promises to send a suitable woman to serve as chaperone. Once they were gone, Idaho turned to Olivia. "Perhaps they're right," he said quietly. "I should move on before your reputation suffers." "Is that what you want?" she asked, searching his face. "What I want and what's right aren't always the same thing." Olivia stepped closer. "Tell me anyway." Idaho met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "I've found peace here I haven't known in years," he admitted, "but I won't be the cause of more pain for you." "You're not," she whispered. "You're the only reason I've survived these weeks." The next day, 16-year-old Mary Wilson arrived with her belongings, sent by the Reverend's wife to serve as Olivia's companion and helper. A quiet, serious girl from a large family in town, Mary was clearly delighted to have her own bed and regular meals in exchange for work. Her presence changed the dynamic at the homestead. Conversations became more guarded, and Idaho spent longer hours in the fields, but it also provided Olivia with female companionship she hadn't realized she needed. "Mr. Blackburn watches you when you're not looking," Mary observed one afternoon as they hung laundry. "Not in an improper way," she added hastily. "More like he's making sure you're all right." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He's been very kind." "My ma says he's dangerous looking," Mary continued, "with those eyes that see too much. But Pa says he's the kind of man you want beside you when trouble comes." "Your father is a wise man," Olivia replied. As May turned to June, the homestead began to feel less like a monument to loss and more like a place with future possibilities. The garden flourished, the repaired barn stood strong, and the wheat field promised a decent harvest. Idaho had become indispensable, not just for his labor, but for the quiet strength he brought to each day. One evening, as Mary retired early with a headache, Olivia and Idaho sat on the porch watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. "I received a letter from Bozeman today," Idaho said after a comfortable silence. "An old friend needs experienced men for a cattle drive north to Fort Benton." Olivia's heart constricted. "You're leaving then?" "The pay is good," he continued, not looking at her. "And it's what I do: move on, find work, keep going." "Is that truly what you want?" she asked, echoing their conversation from weeks before. Idaho finally turned to face her. "What I want," he said slowly, "is something I haven't earned the right to ask for." Olivia reached across the space between them and took his hand. "Ask anyway." His fingers tightened around hers. "I want to stay, Olivia, not as a hired hand, but as more, much more." He drew a deep breath. "I know it's too soon after your loss. I know you need time. But when I see you each morning, I feel hope again, something I thought died with Elizabeth." "Idaho," Olivia began, but he gently pressed a finger to her lips. "Let me finish. I'm not asking for vows or promises, just the chance to build something here with you day by day." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I can't replace what you've lost. I wouldn't try. But those empty arms that were crying out for comfort, I believe I could fill them with love if you'd allow it." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but these were different from the bitter tears of grief. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of feeling too much, of losing again." Idaho nodded. "I know that fear. I live with it every day." "Then how do you find the courage to offer your heart again?" "By recognizing that a life without love isn't really living at all." He reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "We've both survived the worst. Together, perhaps we could do more than merely survive." Olivia leaned into his touch. "I'm not the same woman I was before, and I'm not the same man. We've been forged in fire, both of us." His voice dropped lower. "I don't expect an answer tonight. Just promise you'll consider it before I decide about Bozeman." "I will," she promised. Later that night, as Olivia lay awake, she found herself examining her feelings with an honesty she'd avoided for weeks. Idaho had become essential to her days, his quiet strength, his occasional dry humor, the way he anticipated needs before she expressed them. It wasn't the comfortable affection she'd shared with James, but something wilder and more demanding. Was it disloyal to feel this way so soon? Would James want her to spend years in mourning or to grasp happiness if it appeared? Mourning brought no clear answers, but Olivia rose determined to speak truthfully with Idaho. She found him mending tack in the barn, sleeves rolled up, focused on his work. "Good morning," she said softly. He looked up, his expression guarded. "Morning. I've been thinking about what you said." Olivia moved closer, watching his hands still on the leather straps. "About staying. And I can't promise you an easy path. There will be days when grief overwhelms me, when I might compare what was to what is." Idaho nodded. "I understand that. But," she continued, her voice strengthening, "I don't want you to go to Bozeman. I want you to stay not as a hired hand, but as a partner in whatever future we might build." Hope flickered in his eyes. "You're certain?" "No," she admitted with a small laugh. "I'm terrified. But I know that when you're near, the emptiness recedes. That must mean something." Idaho set aside his work and stood. "It means everything, Olivia." He reached for her hand, and she gave it willingly. With gentle deliberation, he drew her closer until she stood within the circle of his arms, not quite an embrace, but the promise of one. "People will talk," she whispered. "Let them," he replied, echoing her words to the reverend. "We'll do this properly with time and respect, but I won't pretend I don't care for you deeply." "How much time?" she asked, looking up at him. "As much as you need." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Though I admit, patience has never been my strongest virtue." Olivia smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Then perhaps we shouldn't test it too severely." In the weeks that followed, Idaho continued to sleep in the barn, maintaining propriety under Mary's watchful eye. But the nature of his relationship with Olivia transformed. They began taking Sunday rides together, picnicking by the creek that gave the nearby town its name. Idaho taught Olivia to shoot, insisting that a woman alone on the frontier needed such skills. "You have good aim," he observed after she hit 3 bottles in succession. "Steady hands." "They're steadier with you beside me," she replied, lowering the rifle. Their first kiss came on a warm July evening, as fireflies danced around them and the scent of summer grass filled the air. It was gentle and questioning at first, then deepened with months of unspoken longing. When they finally broke apart, Idaho rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you mending fence in the rain, cursing like a cavalry sergeant." Olivia laughed. "I did no such thing." "You most certainly did. It was the moment I knew you were extraordinary." By August, the gossip in town had largely subsided, particularly after Idaho began attending church with Olivia and Mary each Sunday. The reverend, seeing the positive change in the young widow, became less critical of the arrangement. When Idaho formally asked for Olivia's hand in marriage after church one Sunday, even Mrs. Mills had to admit they made a handsome couple. "It's fast," Idaho acknowledged as they walked home, Mary discreetly keeping her distance ahead of them. "If you need more time, I don't," Olivia interrupted. "Life is too uncertain and too precious to waste in unnecessary waiting. I love James and I always will, but my heart has room for a new love, a different love." Idaho squeezed her hand. "You're sure the town won't think?" "The town can think what it pleases," she said firmly. "I know my own mind and heart." They were married in September, with the wheat harvest in and the first hints of autumn coloring the cottonwoods along the creek. It was a simple ceremony in the small church, attended by townspeople who had gradually accepted the unusual courtship. Mary served as Olivia's attendant, Beaming with romantic satisfaction at the match, she considered herself partly responsible for arranging. That night, as Idaho carried Olivia across the threshold of the cabin, now their home together, he paused to look at her in the lamplight. "I never thought I'd find this again," he said softly. "A home, a future worth building." Olivia touched his face, tracing the lines etched by sun and past sorrows. "Those empty arms I had when you found me, they're full now with hope, with possibilities." "With love," he finished, lowering his head to kiss her. The seasons turned, as they always do on the frontier. Winter brought snowdrifts and long evenings by the fire, with Idaho teaching Olivia to play chess and Olivia reading aloud from her small collection of books. Spring came again, bringing new calves to their small but growing herd and the discovery that Olivia was expecting a child. "Are you afraid?" Idaho asked one night, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Yes," she admitted, "but not enough to stop hoping." Their daughter was born the following November, a strong, healthy girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. They named her Hope Elizabeth Blackburn, honoring both the future and the past. As Idaho placed their daughter in Olivia's arms for the first time, he whispered, "Look at that arms that will never be empty again." Olivia smiled through tears of joy. "Because you filled them with love, just as you promised." 5 years later, the Blackburn homestead had grown into a prosperous small ranch. 2 more children had joined Hope, a son named James, after Olivia's first husband, and another daughter called Lily. The original cabin had been expanded, and a new barn stood where the old one had weathered its last storm. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Idaho and Olivia rode to the cemetery where she had once knelt in despair. They placed flowers on 3 graves, teaching their children about the family that had come before. "They would be happy," Olivia said softly as the children ran ahead, chasing butterflies among the markers, "to know that life continued." Idaho slipped his arm around her waist. "That's the miracle, isn't it? That hearts can break completely, yet somehow find the capacity to love again even more deeply." Olivia leaned into him, watching their children living embodiments of hope reborn from grief. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day? When I was crying into empty arms, that I would fill them with love," he recalled, smiling down at her. "It was a promise kept," she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him beneath the vast Montana sky. "Every single day,